Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva. Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtotra Shada Shri Srimad Abhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gauriya Vaishnav Guru Varga Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol All Gauri Simudaveris Hare Krishna All Gauri Simudaveris Hare Krishna All Gauri Simudaveris Hare Krishna All Gauri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 4, Text 5. Tathapi tad abhipretam Janannaham Arindama Prishthato Nvagamam Bhartuhu Pada Vishleshanaakshamaha Tathapi tad abhipretam Janannaham Arindama Prishthato Nvagamam Bhartuhu Pada Vishleshanaakshamaha Tathapi tad abhipretam Janannaham Arindama Prishthato Nvagamam Bhartuhu Pada Vishleshananakshanama Akshamaha. Tathapi tadabhipretam Jananaham Arindama Vishtatonvagamam bhartu Pada Vishleshanaakshamaha Tathapi tadabhipretam Jananaham mirindama Prishtatonvagamam bhartu Pada Vishleshanaakshamaha Tadapita vipretam Janam annahindama Nishtato Mahapatu Pada Vishleshanaakshamaha. Mataji's. Tada Vyapavipreta Tanamiyanitama Vishtato Nagamam Bhartu Pada Vishleshanaakshamaha Tathapi tadabhipretam Jananaham arindana Prishtatonvagamam bhartu Pada Vishleshanaakshamaha. Tatha api, yet in spite of. Tat abhipretam, his desire. Janan, knowing. Aham, I. Arimdama, O subduer of the enemy Vidura. Prishtataha, behind. Anvagamam, followed. Bhartuhu, of the master. Pada Vishleshana, separation from his lotus feet. Akshamaha, not being able. The translation is, yet in spite of my knowing his desire to destroy the dynasty, O Arindama, Vidura, I followed him because it was impossible for me to bear separation from the lotus feet of the master. And then I'll also quickly read over text 6 and the translation and purport for that, because there's no purport for text 5. So that's Adraksham ekam asinam vichinvandaitam patim Sriniketam sarasvatyam krittaketam aketanam, which translates to, thus following, I saw my patron and master, Lord Sri Krishna, sitting alone and deeply thinking, taking shelter on the back of the river Saraswati, although he is the shelter of the goddess of fortune. The purport, those who are in the renounced order of life often take shelter underneath a tree. The Lord was found by Uddhav in that condition of taking shelter, as do persons who have no shelter. Because he is the proprietor of everything, everywhere is his shelter, and everywhere is under his shelter. The entire material and spiritual cosmic manifestation is sustained by him, and therefore he is the shelter of everything. So there was nothing astounding in his taking shelter in the way of the unsheltered who are in the renounced order of life. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. So, today we've read a few texts. This is Vidura approaching Maitreya. So, we've just finished the conversation with Uddhav. And now we're reading this section. And we have this wonderful text here speaking about Krishna taking shelter on the bank of the river Saraswati, although he himself is the shelter of the goddess of fortune. And we hear about how Krishna, everything is his shelter, and everything is his possession. He is the proprietor of all. Sometimes people wonder, because we hear of all of the different ways in which Krishna, he is the greatest. He is the most beautiful, he is the most wealthy, he is the most powerful, and he is also the most renounced. And sometimes people think this doesn't make sense because, well, Krishna owns everything. That's the opposite of the most renounced. It is not that Krishna has nothing, which is what we would associate renunciation with, but Krishna has everything. There is nothing which Krishna cannot point to and say, this is mine. So then how can Krishna be the most renounced? People often wonder this. I often wondered this. But we can understand it in two ways. The second way we won't get into, but it's in Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada mentions it in his purports. That's a more rasic explanation. But in Tattva, in philosophical concern, we can say that even though Krishna owns everything, even though Krishna is the possessor of everything, Krishna needs nothing but himself. And in this way, Krishna is the most renounced. Nothing can be more renounced than having everything, but needing none of it. Because Krishna sustains in and of himself. He is the source of everything. Everything is not the source of him. So because Krishna has everything, but doesn't need to use it, and practically doesn't use it, because of that, Krishna is the most renounced. Everything is available to him, and he utilizes none of it. So Krishna, the most renounced. Because this is the fullest understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. People will have many different understandings. Srila Bhakti Hridoy Bon Maharaj, the disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it's well known. He went on a preaching tour to Germany and England and all of these places under the instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And going throughout all the places, he stayed a long while in Germany because the Nazi government was actually very favorable to Krishna consciousness until they found out that it doesn't support nationalism, at which point they didn't become so favorable. Because, of course, the Nazi cause was built upon nationalism for the German nation. But up until they found that out, they were very favorable. They gave a lot of funding and everything. And in fact, the first Western-bodied disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was a German, Sadananda Prabhu. You can see there's a few photos of him. I think they did a few Back to Godhead articles on him a while ago. So, after Maharaj, he came back from his preaching tour. He had lots of stories to share with all the other sannyasis. And there was one story that he would share, and all the sannyasis, they all loved it. All of the sannyasis in the Gauriya Math, all of his godbrothers, they would always laugh and relish this. Because when he was in Germany, he saw a play, and this was a very spiritual play, a religious play, which is why he attended. And in it, God was there, and God was played by a very old man with a very big beard. And to all of the sannyasis, that was very funny. They would always laugh. They would find this so funny that God is a very, very old man with a big beard who's watching everything. This is rather funny to them. Because, of course, as I said, God, He's full of all of these qualities and all beautiful. All of these things. This is the fullest understanding of God. The reason why they portray God as an old man with a beard is because, well, God is the oldest of all things. So shouldn't He have a beard, right? But this doesn't make sense. Because older than an old man with a beard, if we are to show the oldest thing possible in order to portray God, older than an old man with a beard would actually be a dead man. And then you would have a dead God, which is not much of a God at all. So this whole idea doesn't make sense. Actually, the only being that could be the oldest being of them all would be a being who's infinitely youthful. Because in order to survive that long, you must have a lot of youth in order to last longer than anything else. So actually, the oldest being is not the oldest being with a beard, but the most youthful being. And we have that in Krishna, that wonderful shelter of all reality. And what does Srila Prabhupada say? He is doing so like those in the renounced order of life. So today is the appearance day of Srila Shyamananda Pandit. So I thought, here's a nice renounced person. We can speak some pastimes of his. Now his pastimes, they begin a few generations earlier with Gauridas Pandit. We might know Gauridas Pandit is Subal in Krishna Lila, and in Gaur Lila he has appeared as Gauridas Pandit. And so one day, Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, they were living with Gauridas Pandit. Gauridas Pandit, he had accommodated them in his household. And Gauridas Pandit accommodating them, he was very happy, as anyone would be, to shelter the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and both of them, together in his household. But at one point they had to leave. They had to leave the household, and Gauridas Pandit, he became very upset. He said, please don't leave. Please never leave. And they said, no, it's all right, and we'll come back. Gauridas Pandit said, hey, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You are Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You have fooled the gopis before with this sort of language. Don't think you can fool me. You didn't come back for them, and you're not going to come back for me. So Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, they said, no, it's all right. We will leave our deities here. And so they manifested their deity forms. And then there was 4 personalities of Godhead. There were the 2 Murti forms, and there was Krishna Chaitanya and Sri Nityananda Ram. So both of those were there. But what did Gauridas Pandit say then? He said, oh, so you're telling me these deity forms are equal to you? So, you know what you should do? You two stay here and let the deities go preach. You stay here and the deities can go preach. And then Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Ram, they thought, oh, this is a difficult case. What they did is then they switched. Suddenly the deities came to life. And suddenly Mahaprabhu and Nityananda, they became the Murtis. They switched like this. And then Gauridas Pandit, he thought, what's going on? And then they switched back again, and Gauridas Pandit, he's like, oh, okay, now I know which ones to stay home. And then they switched back and forth, and they would switch spots and everything, until at one point Gauridas Pandit, he forgot which one was the original, which one's the deity. I'll take either one. And so he kept those deities. And so Gauridas Pandit, he has these very, very beautiful deities, right? So Gauridas Pandit, he had one disciple. And this disciple of his was the foremost of his disciples, Hridayananda. Hridayananda Pandit was the name of this disciple of his. And so Hridayananda, he very much, in the absence of his spiritual master, he would help run the place because he was the foremost of the disciples. And so Hridayananda, he was running the place, and in the build-up to Gaur Purnima, his spiritual master, Gauridas Pandit, he had gone to an ashram to take care of some of his disciples, traveling around, the spiritual master, making sure all his disciples are fine. And as the days were leading up to Gaur Purnima, Hridayananda, he became very worried. Where is my spiritual master? He's not here. What are we going to do for Gaur Purnima? He was thinking like this and thinking like this, thinking like this. And as the days went closer and closer, Gauridas Pandit, he was no closer to returning. So then eventually he said, okay, look, I'm going to have to take matters into my own hands. And he sent out invites to all of the Vaishnavas, all of the sadhus, and he said, please come to our ashram and we'll have a nice celebration of Gaur Purnima. And on the day before Gaur Purnima, after sending out all these invitations, Gauridas Pandit returns. And he sits down with Hridayananda and he tells him, okay, now let's plan for our Gaur Purnima celebration. And Hridayananda, he said, Gurudev, I've already planned the whole celebration. And internally, Gauridas Pandit was very pleased with his disciple. But externally, he chastised him. He said, you rascal. Srila Prabhupada, he would often criticize. He would say, my Western body disciples, they have the Western disease. The Western disease is the changing disease. They want to change everything, do everything independently. So, Gauridas Pandit was saying the similar thing to Hridayananda. He was saying, you're always trying to do things. Even in my presence, you are trying to take control of my preaching mission. You rascal, you're trying to hijack this movement. Like this, he chastised Hridayananda. And Hridayananda gave his Dandavat Pranam to his spiritual master, and very dejectedly, he went onto the bank of the Ganga. And on the bank of the Ganga, this old Bura, this old man, he came, right? And he came up and he said, I have some donation for you. Please take this donation. Hridayananda, he said, no, I'm not worthy of anything, he was already humble and he was also very upset. He'd really just copped it, a solid chastisement. But then, later, he told the spiritual master, and the spiritual master said, oh, you fool, take the donation. We can use it to fund this Gaur Purnima celebration. Since he ran back, and the old man was still there. We know old men can't move very fast. So he was still there, and he took the donation, right? And like that, he prepared this whole celebration. And on the day, they were all there on the bank of the Ganga. And with this big celebration, all the Vaishnavas were there. Lots of prasad, beautiful kirtan, and this roaring kirtan was occurring. And in this roaring kirtan, Hridayananda, he was dancing and dancing and dancing. And all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, they were dancing and singing as well. And not just them, but those deities of Nityananda Ram and Sri Krishna Chaitanya, they also began to dance in this kirtan. And so, when Gauridas Pandit, when the pujari of Gauridas Pandit went to perform archan of these deities, he said, oh, hey, Ram, now I'm really going to get it. They've gone. Did I do such a bad job? Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, they've run away from me. So he was dejected and he told Gauridas Pandit. Gauridas Pandit knew what happened. But still he thought, this poor pujari, he needs to do his pujari seva. So he took out a stick. And he went out. He knew exactly where they had run to. And he went out to the kirtan party. Everyone dancing and so ecstatic. And Gauridas Pandit, he went there with the intent to chase Mahaprabhu back into his house. We know how much Gauridas Pandit wants Mahaprabhu to stay in his house, right? He has such a strong desire for it. So he thought, I don't care if they're enjoying the kirtan. Mahaprabhu's coming back into my house. But the moment he saw Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Ram dancing in this kirtan, he began to cry. He dropped the stick. He was unable to do anything. And so in those moments of ecstasy, Nityananda Ram and Sri Krishna Chaitanya, enjoying the devotion of their devotee, the kirtan became even more ecstatic. And then at one point, Gauridas Pandit, he came back and he thought, no, Mahaprabhu is not running away so easily. And so he grabbed the stick and he chased after Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Ram, and they ran away. Running away. And so there they were running, but they thought, we can't run away from our devotee. We know Damodar pastimes, right? Jashodama, how quickly she can capture Krishna. I was speaking a few weeks ago. We hear in the Damodar Ashtakam, it says that Mother Jashoda, she captures Krishna from behind. This means until the very last moment, Krishna was resisting being caught. Because if he wasn't resisting, he would have turned around. From behind means at the very last second, Krishna was trying to escape, but Krishna cannot escape his devotee. So they thought, but our devotee, maybe he can escape. So Nityananda Ram and Mahaprabhu, they both jumped into the heart of Hridayananda. And so Hridayananda began to run away. And so everyone was seeing this, and they were so confused. What has happened to Gauridas Pandit? He's chasing his disciple with a stick saying, get back on the altar, get back on the altar. And his disciple Hridayananda is running away. Everyone was thinking, who knows what happens with great devotees beyond our understanding. So like this was happening. And eventually, of course, the disciple also cannot escape away from the spiritual master. And so Gauridas Pandit, he captures Hridayananda, but he doesn't hit him with the stick. He hugs him and he begins to cry. And he says, how great of a pastime is this? You are not Hriday Chaitanya. You are not Hridayananda. You are Hriday Chaitanya. You are not Hridayananda, you are Hriday Chaitanya, because Mahaprabhu is dwelling within your heart. So he received a new name on that day. And this is the name we normally know him under. We do not know him as Hridayananda so much. He was renamed Hriday Chaitanya. Like this, he was renamed. And so Hriday Chaitanya, he became the head pujari. He was the one who was taking care of these deities after the disappearance of Gauridas Pandit. Gauridas Pandit had a very deep relationship with these deities. He was Shubal in Krishna Lila, as we described. And sometimes, in very intimate moments, those deities would become deities of Krishna Balaram. And Gauridas Pandit, he would become Shubal again. And they would run around together, and they would reenact Vraj pastimes. So these are very intimate, very beautiful deities. And even today, if you go and have darshan, they're very different. Radha Gopinath, they're so merciful. Most times of the day we go, we receive darshan. These deities they're also merciful, but the devotees of these deities, they're a little insecure. They're worried they'll run away again. So actually the darshans are very short. You can only get very brief darshans there because they're worried. If the darshan is too long, they might jump off the altar again. So like this, these very beautiful, intimate deities. So we can understand what is the great position of Hriday Chaitanya. What is the great position of Hriday Chaitanya, that he was left in charge of those deities. So left in charge of those deities, then now we hear of a boy born to a Vaishnav and Vaishnavi, Krishna Mandal and Durika. Durika is the mother and Krishna Mandal is the father. And this boy, all of his siblings, they passed away very young. And because they were very sad because of this, they named their child Dukhi. Dukhi. So there's two explanations given. One is they were just very sad, so they named him Dukhi. The other one is that they thought, oh well, if we name him Dukhi, then when death comes, death will say, oh, this is a depressing child. We don't want to take this child. Even death will try to avoid a child that's sad and morose. There's a great sadhu from Orissa. He entered into the he's left his body and gone back home, back to Godhead. But he was a dear friend of His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj. His name is Fakir Mohandas. That's his initiated name. And it's a similar pastime. He was given the name Fakir because his parents thought death will not want to come and take a fakir, you know what I mean? And his spiritual master liked that story so much, he kept it in his initiated name. Anyway, so Dukhi. So here we had little Dukhi. And Dukhi was born in a Shudra family, what are called the Sadgopas. They deliver milk, dairy products. So they're like the milkmen, right? So not by Varnashram standards, not a very elevated birth. But we are not concerned with Varnashram standards. We are concerned with Vaishnav standards. And by Vaishnav standards, Dukhi, even as a small child, was very, very elevated. He loved the study of Sanskrit. Whoever he could deliver milk products to, whatever katha they could tell him, he would hear. He would hear of all the associates of Mahaprabhu. He would hear all of these pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And whenever he would deliver to an elevated person, he would try and pick up some knowledge of Sanskrit, of the Shastras like this. So his parents, being very saintly, they thought, here, our son Dukhi, he is a sadhu. So they encouraged him, go take shelter of a Vaishnav. And so he said, I have heard of many associates. I've heard of many, many associates of Mahaprabhu. But the one who takes my heart is Gauridas Pandit and his disciple Hriday Chaitanya. So he says, I will go. And his mother became very upset. She said, when I said initiation, I meant initiation from somebody close by. Don't go so far away to Hriday Chaitanya. Because Hriday Chaitanya was a little further away. Not so far away. I actually can't remember now where that temple is. But Dukhi, he was living in Orissa. So it was a little bit of a trek. But then he said, Mother, I have heard of Hriday Chaitanya. I've heard of him. This is before Facebook era. So it's not that he heard of him online. How could I have heard of him if there weren't people who knew him coming around and preaching? So clearly there's lots of travel here and there. I'll come visit, don't worry. So like this, if you know how the pastime goes later on, you'll know his mother will be even more upset when he goes to Vrindavan. But anyway, so he says, okay. And then he goes. And he's traveling along, and Hriday Chaitanya happily accepts him as a disciple. So, and he initiates him, and what name does he give him? Krishna Das. So then, Dukhi becomes Dukhi Krishna Das. It's a really unique name. So Dukhi Krishna Das, he's there, and he's serving his spiritual master, and he's serving him very happily. They have a very, very nice relationship. But at one point, Dukhi Krishna Das, he says, not Dukhi Krishna Das, Hriday Chaitanya Das, he says, my dear disciple Dukhi Krishna, there is a great sadhu named Jiva Goswami. I can see you have a great taste for philosophy. Of all of the devotees on earth today, no devotee has greater mastery of philosophy than Srila Jiva Goswami. Actually, the collected works of Jiva Goswami are longer than the Mahabharata. So he is a great philosopher. If you read his Satsandarbhas, like the highest philosophy. Is really, really complex. To think, is complete mastery. He's quoting shastras from here and there. He's quoting grammatical principles from different schools of Vedic philosophy, everything. Jiva Goswami is out of this world. We can still experience that if we read any of his literature. So Jiva Goswami, he says, go study under Jiva Goswami. I've written a letter here to authorize you. Take shiksha from Jiva Goswami. So then, Dukhi Krishna Das, he is thinking, on the one hand, he's thinking, I'm upset to leave the association of my spiritual master. On the other hand, this is my spiritual master's order, how can I deny it? And on the other hand, he is still placing me under a devotee who I can see as his representative. So he goes and he makes the journey to Jiva Goswami. And on the way, he stops at Radhakund. And at Radhakund, he meets Raghunath Das Goswami and Krishna Das Kaviraj, both great devotees. And they say, who are you? And you know how it's like with devotees. What's your name? Oh, Dukhi Krishna Das. Oh, who's your spiritual master? Oh, Hriday Chaitanya. Upon hearing that they had the association of a disciple of Hriday Chaitanya, Raghunath Das Goswami and Krishna Das Kaviraj, they became ecstatic. They began to smile and laugh, and they became so happy. And they blessed Dukhi Krishna. They said, please take our blessings. We are so fortunate to have the association of a disciple of Hriday Chaitanya. So they said, and if you want to know where Jiva Goswami is, he's right over there. We're close. We know each other well. So Dukhi Krishna Das, then he went over to Jiva Goswami. And he presented the letter, and he was accepted under the tutelage of Jiva Goswami. And so, of course, being the disciple, we know how is spiritual knowledge acquired. Is it acquired by sitting down in classes? No. Pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. So, pranipatena, pariprashnena. This is listening to and hearing knowledge. It is a part of it, but it's only 1/3. The other 2/3 are what? Pranipata, to have dandavats, to give your respect and worship to the spiritual master, and the other one is seva, service. So, Dukhi Krishna, Dukhi Krishna Das, he asks Jiva Goswami, he says, what service can I do for you? I'm learning, but please give me some service. Jiva Goswami says, I like you very much. You are a very sweet disciple of mine. So I give you a very, very sweet service. You can sweep the kunj. And normally when people, if you see actually at the end of, on Sunday feast, we've started having Sunday feast again, but you remember back in the day when it was very big, when devotees come and you can see they're asking to help people clean up, you can see people sort of look and they go in another direction. We all see it, right? We see it often, this devotee's coming to ask me to help clean up. Oh, and then you run off. Oh no, I need to go home. Everyone leaves. But actually, among the great devotees is the opposite approach. They become ecstatic. We know in the, what's it? I'm mind blanking. What's the mandir which Mahaprabhu cleans? Yeah. When he cleans that, what does he do? He doesn't get asked to do it. He himself begs to do it. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead sees the cleaning of a mandir as something that he would beg for, then what should we be doing in order to be allowed to do that? We should be doing much more than begging, right? So, Dukhi Krishna Das, he was very, very happy to sweep. And so he would sweep every day. And, of course, this is Vraj. We shouldn't think that Radha, Krishna, the Sakhis, the Gopas, we should not think that they are not running around there right now. Actually, one disciple of Srila Prabhupada, I forgot her name, but she was a really advanced, she's recently gone back to Godhead, but I think Mula Prakriti, I can't remember her name, but she did interviews of all the sadhus who knew Srila Prabhupada before Srila Prabhupada founded ISKCON. And she was interviewing all of them. What were their memories of Srila Prabhupada back when he was in India, as a grihasta, as a vanaprastha, and even as an early sannyasi. And so they had all these sweet memories. And there was this one Babaji who knew Srila Prabhupada when he was living in Radha Damodar Mandir. And initially, because at the time they didn't call him Prabhupada, they called him Swami Maharaj. So, initially she said, Srila Prabhupada, did you know him? And, I never met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He was saying like this. And then she said, no, Swami Maharaj. He said, oh, Swami Maharaj. And upon hearing the name Swami Maharaj, he began to cry. And crying upon hearing the name of Srila Prabhupada, he then said, do not think that in Radha Damodar Mandir, Srila Prabhupada is not even today still eternally planning his preaching. Do not think that Srila Prabhupada is not praying still at the Samadhi there. Do not think that Srila Prabhupada is not writing his books there. Do not think that he is not doing those things even now. So the Vaishnavas and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, eternally they're manifesting their pastime in Vraj. So, eternally manifesting their pastimes, and so one day, got a little wild, and Srimati Radharani, we know the pastime, right? She drops her anklet. She drops the anklet. And so, Dukhi Krishna Das, while he's sweeping, he finds something glowing beautifully, and he touches it, and it zaps him. But it zaps him with like Krishna Prem. So he zaps it and he's singing Hare Krishna. Like this, he's saying that. He's feeling japped with transcendental energy. He realizes, oh, this is something special. So in his shawl, he wraps it up. And Srimati Radharani, after the wild kirtan the night before, she's thinking, hey, I've lost something. And so she tells Lalita Sakhi, she says, hey, go see if somebody's taken it. So Lalita Sakhi, she dresses up as an old woman, she disguises herself, and she goes around, and she sees Dukhi Krishna Das simply sweeping the kunj, and she thinks, well, he'll know where it is. And she said, hello, have you seen a little anklet here? Dukhi Krishna Das, he said, why are you asking? And she says, oh, because she's playing a role. She says, my daughter-in-law, she's lost her anklet. I'm looking for it. She's very sad. And then he said, oh, this is the anklet of a very special personality. I cannot just give this to you. So then she thinks, oh, tough case. So what she does, her and some accounts say Vishaka, some say Vishaka also didn't join. Sorry? Some accounts say Vishaka was also there. Some say it was just Lalita. There's differences in accounts. But either way, they blindfold him and take him into Srimati Radharani's room. And then suddenly, they open it, and having darshan of Srimati Radharani, Dukhi Krishna Das, he's thinking, oh, this is, the perfection of my life. And he takes the anklet. Again, some versions, they say that Srimati Radharani, she took the anklet and she drew the tilak on his head. Other versions say he pressed it onto his head, and then it formed his tilak, right? So he had a new tilak then. It actually looks like the tilak of the Nimbarka line. If we ever see the devotees in the line of Nimbarkacharya, their tilak is like that, like this. But the difference is they have a dot in there, because she then touched it. At the end, she does touch just a point of it, the little bell. She points a little bell on his forehead, and that makes a little dot in the center. But it's red for the followers of Shyamananda. Spoiler, that's what his name becomes. And it's black for the followers of Nimbarkacharya. So they look similar, but they are distinct. So like this, she gives a new tilak. And Jiva Goswami initially saying, hey, that's not the tilak of my line. Because each parivar, if you go, the different parivars, the different families of the different disciples of Mahaprabhu, they all have different tilaks. That's how you can tell what sampradaya you're in. Actually, traditionally, you didn't wear tilak until you were initiated. This is how it was traditionally done. At the point of initiation, the spiritual master would show you how to draw the tilak of his line. So, and different disciples. So if you see the followers of Gadadhar Pandit, their tilak's actually really cool. It goes all the way down and it goes to like the tip of your nose, right? Advaita Parivar looks very similar to ours, but the leaf is a little wider on the side. Like this, the different Parivars, they have all sorts of different tilaks, right? So Jiva Goswami was like, hey, what's going on? And so Dukhi Krishnadas, he said the pastime. And so Jiva Goswami thought, Dukhi Krishnadas, he wouldn't lie. And he says, this is so ecstatic. From now, I will give you the new name, Shyamananda. So like this, he received the name Shyamananda. Now, Hridaya Chaitanya, he became very upset upon hearing this. Because around the grapevine, all of the hate sites, all the anti-ISKCON sites, they were all doing posts, all of these critical posts. Jiva Goswami has reinitiated Dukhi Krishnadas. He has blasphemed the lotus feet of Hridaya Chaitanya. Jiva Goswami is an aparadhi. Hridaya Chaitanya, he became very upset upon hearing this. Very, very angry. So he ran over. He ran to Vraj, to Jiva Goswami. He already sent out a letter condemning Jiva Goswami, the aparadhi. And so like this he condemned. And he came, and then upon hearing this, Jiva Goswami, he heard that people were saying this. Before, of course, Hridaya Chaitanya arrived. And he told Shyamananda, he said, I am only teaching you under the direct instruction of Hridaya Chaitanya. I am only teaching you under his instruction. Anything that I give you is just his mercy. And this is actually a very significant tattva. Jiva Goswami himself writes in the Bhakti Sandarbha about the relationship of the Shiksha Guru and the Diksha Guru. We should consider the Shiksha Guru to be the representative of the Diksha Guru, which is why back in the day, if you had regular contact, even now, if one takes a proper Shiksha Guru, not just I take Shiksha sometimes, but the proper manifestation of the Shiksha Guru, I treat this person as a spiritual master, ask permission of your Diksha Guru. This is the principle. So, this is also the principle that was acting here. And Jiva Goswami writes it later on in his writings. If you ever read Bhakti Sandarbha, after you've read Prabhupada's books, it's a very nice book to read. Very technical. So he mentions that there. He also mentions the different types of Shiksha Gurus, but I don't want to go over time. It's a long discussion. He goes very deeply into Shiksha Guru Tattva. Actually, I'll just say it. So there's two types of Shiksha Gurus, actually. There's the Shravana Shiksha Guru. That is a Shiksha Guru that we hear Shastra from. We learn Shastra from them. We learn about Bhagavatam. And there's the Bhajana Shiksha Guru. And this is the Shiksha Guru who instructs one upon one's bhajan, one's sadhana, one's chanting, one's observation of vrats, all of these things. This is the Bhajan Shiksha Guru. One who guides one in the practice of Krishna consciousness, and one who guides one on the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Practice is the Bhajan Shiksha Guru, and philosophy is the Shravan Shiksha Guru. Anyways, and he goes even further. It's nectarian, if you like philosophy. So anyway, so this is the tattva. The Shiksha Guru is only representing the Diksha Guru. Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he would take Shiksha sometimes from many Vaishnavas, but he would always say, Srila Prabhupada has sent them to me in order to further instruct me into Srila Prabhupada's books, right? So like this we can understand. The Shiksha Guru is the representative of the Diksha Guru. And so, Jiva Goswami, he was saying, this is only the mercy of your spiritual master, Hridaya Chaitanya. So like this he was saying. But Hridaya Chaitanya, he was having none of this. So Hridaya Chaitanya, he came very angry. And he was saying, Jiva Goswami, what have you done? And so they became very angry. And then he saw his disciple, Shyamananda. And he told Shyamananda, he said, hey, Dukhi Krishna. And he pulled out his stick and he hit him. Hit him once, twice, 3 times, He hit him. He said, of course, we might think this is not Vaishnav-like behavior. But actually, Guru Ravagya, to disregard the spiritual master is a very severe offense. To be corrected upon this is something, even though that wasn't the case of what happened here, but if that was the case, this should be treated very heavily. Anyway, so, whacking, he was just saying, what have you done, How could you do this? I sent you here, with all the well wishes in my heart. And what have you done? And anyways, later that night, we know the story. Mahaprabhu, he appears in the dream of Hridaya Chaitanya, and he's covered in bruises and cuts. And Hridaya Chaitanya, he falls at the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu in the dream, and he says, Mahaprabhu, what's happened? What's happened to your beautiful, effulgent, gore-colored skin? And Mahaprabhu said, Shyamananda Prabhu, he used the other name just to drive the point home. Shyamananda Prabhu is my dear, dear disciple. When you went to strike him, I thought, how could my devotee be hurt? So I took each one of those blows. Every blow that you struck and hit him with actually hit me. So now you go and you realize Jiva Goswami was only acting as your representative. He was only acting as your representative. He has done no bad. And because of that, of course, Hridaya Chaitanya, he became very, 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 very repentant. And he went and he repented both to his disciple and to Jiva Goswami, and all was well and good. So like this, we hear these are the pastimes of Shyamananda Pandit. But there's one interesting point that I wanted to touch upon. I won't be able to touch upon it fully, because we're going to go over time soon, but just a tiny bit of how these pastimes relate to something else. How they're related to the other event today, which is Balaram Rasa Yatra. So we hear that Shubal, he appears as Gauridas Pandit. And Hridaya Chaitanya himself is also in Sakhya Ras. Shubal is in Sakhya Ras. He's in a special category of Sakhya Ras, but it's a bit too rasic to get into the details in a Bhagavatam class. He's what's called a Priyanarma Sakha. But anyways, but he is in Sakhya Ras. The Priyanarma Sakhas are in Sakhya Ras, right? And his disciple Hridaya Chaitanya is also in Sakhya Ras. On Parikrama, Hridaya Chaitanya afterwards, he went on Parikrama with Shyamananda, right? And going on Parikrama, at certain points there was very Madhurya Ras filled locations, obviously in Braj. And so Shyamananda Pandit became ecstatic, crying and dancing like this. And Hridaya Chaitanya looked at him funny. And he was thinking, hey, we're a Sakhya Ras line. Why are you feeling the ecstasy of Madhurya Ras? What are you doing? And he was saying, I knew it. He has deviated from my line. This was before Mahaprabhu appears in his dream, saying, you've struck me. And this was actually the main time that he struck him. And then he said, and then Shyamananda was saying, no. Within Madhurya Ras there is Sakhya Ras. If we read Rai Ramananda Samvad, Sakhya Ras is contained within Madhurya Ras. I'm following in your line, Gurudev. And then, so this whole pastime happened, and then, he appears in the dream. But there's two tattvas. Firstly, and quickly, just briefly, sometimes people, they like to always go, the gopis, the manjaris, like this. This is what all of our lines are about. We'll all be manjaris. People will say this and that. But actually, this is a later development in our line. This is not the practice of the early devotees of Mahaprabhu. There was both Sakhya Ras and Madhurya Ras. Later on, there become this big emphasis, and therefore lots of Babajis, they will do Siddha Pranali initiation, and they will say you're this gopi, you're that gopi. They will never make you a gopa. This form of initiation is valid technically. Bhaktivinoda Thakur received it, and he said it is a valid form of initiation. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said practically 99.95% of people who do this are bogus, right? It's by and large, they're just making it up. They just think, and then they just give you a random name and random details, right? This is by and large what happened. This is why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, those of us who are following in his line, we do not practice that. But just as a point of clarification, it doesn't mean we can condemn everyone who does it. Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur did say that the practice itself is valid, even if it is being abused. Anyways, a little side note. So as that tradition developed, Sakhya Ras became neglected. But actually in our line, we have, again, how can we say Hridaya Chaitanya, who received his name because Mahaprabhu dwelled in his heart directly? How can we say that this is a lower devotee? Those on Sakhya Ras are equal to those on Madhurya Ras. And Madhurya Ras, Sakhya Ras, they are both present in our sampradaya. Again, just because of historical developments, I'll get into more details, but I will end at 9 o'clock. I've made the vrata to myself. I will not go over time. We can go into more details how that developed. But essentially, that was not the early attitude. Sakya Ras was very, very much celebrated. And from there we can, So, we see here, Sakya Ras plays a prominent role in our sampradaya. And we know who is more in Sakya Ras than Balaram. I mean, we could sit down and think for a while. We wouldn't be able to think of anyone. Balaram is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in general, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a servitor. Even though he is Vishnu Tattva, he's in this very special position. He is Vishnu Tattva almost playing the role of Shakti Tattva, in a sense. Because the Shakti serve the Shaktiman. Even though Balaram is Vishnu Tattva, he also very much, there's a bit of overlap there. Not in Tattva, but in Rasa. In terms of the pastimes, he very much acts like a Shakti, even though he 100%, please, I'm not going to say Apasiddhanta, he is Vishnu Tattva, right? So he's serving. And again, if we had more time, Chaitanya Bhagavat lists this beautiful list of 10 main ways in which Balaram serves Krishna. As a friend, as his ornaments, all of these beautiful, as a brother, Bhai, Sakya, I can't remember the shlok, it all rhymes, it's very cute. So, like this, we hear Balaram. Balaram, he is in Sakya Rasa. And furthermore, we hear the description. Does anyone know the Sanskrit word that's used to describe the type of white that Balaram is? It's spatik. In Radha Krishna Ganadesha Deepika, it's described. His skin, the color is spatik. Spatik refers to a crystal or camphor, like the transparent oils. It means the white that Balaram is a crystal-like whiteness. It is a oil-like whiteness. It is transparent. Why is it transparent? Because he is not in the mood of Krishna. He is not in the mood of exhibiting Shyam, that beautiful glow. Some acharyas have described that the shadow of Krishna would look like, if you could imagine, the Himalayas. We all know the Himalayas, Mount Everest. If we could imagine all of them composed of sapphire, and then if we could imagine how a sunrise would be with the sun gleaming through that beautiful mountain range, we would have an idea of what a tiny fraction of the shadow of Krishna would be like. Very beautiful, to understate it. And then we could understand a fraction of the shadow of Krishna's beautiful effulgence. But this is not Balaram. Balaram, he is playing the role of the devotee, and therefore he is crystal. That light which shines through that mountain, reflects out through Balaram. This is why Srila Prabhupada says, what is the spiritual master? Spiritual master is none other than empowered by Balaram. Balaram represents that foundational mood of the spiritual master. So, what is the spiritual master? Srila Prabhupada says, the transparent via medium. The spiritual master reflects that beautiful effulgence of Krishna into the world. He is not Krishna. But he reflects that beautiful effulgence of Krishna, which is why we can consider him qualitative, in many ways, equal to Krishna. We treat the spiritual master as Krishna. Why? Because he is like Balaram. He is empowered by Balaram, that crystal which is reflecting the effulgence of Krishna into the world. This is the glory of the spiritual master. And those who do not act as a crystal do not act as the spiritual master. I was seeing these photos. Initially I laughed, and then I got angry, and then I just felt sick. There's one of these bogus gurus in India. I won't hurt our ears by mentioning his name, but he dressed up like Venkateshwar. They put all of the ornaments on him, and he did the pose, and all of his disciples did a full big yagya worshipping him. Dressed up as Balaji, as Venkateshwar. How revolting it was to see. Initially it was comical. I laughed. I thought, how absurd to see this, this person who's not qualified to touch the feet of demons, actually, let alone of Venkateshwar, to act as Venkateshwar. This is revolting, because this is what happens if an individual attempts to present themselves. They're not channeling that. They're trying to jump into that position. And if they try to present themselves as having that glow, again, it's revolting. They're some of the most ugliest photos I've ever seen in my life. But if we see someone like Srila Prabhupada, our own spiritual masters. If we see them, they are the opposite. How beautiful, how effulgent, how glorious. And this is why hearing the katha of the devotee is equal to hearing the katha of Krishna. It is equally glorious to hear the pastimes of Shyamananda Pandit than it is to hear the pastimes of Mahaprabhu. Why? Because all of the qualities of Krishna can be seen reflected through the life of the Vaishnavas. All of that beauty is there. So anyway, so Balaram, he is in this mood. He is crystal-like, like camphor. So because he is the servitor. So Balaram is in Sakhya Ras, and he is the servitor. So now we have a bit of confusion. Obviously, we won't discuss the actual pastime of Balaram Rasa Yatra because I'm not qualified to hear it, let alone to speak it. But there's a few siddhantas in there, just to understand quickly, and we'll conclude on that point. Because we can maybe misunderstand this pastime. Obviously, we do not dwell on this pastime, but we should also understand where it is in the siddhanta, because otherwise it seems to violate what we know of Balaram. Because it doesn't make sense. How can Balaram, who is serving, then be the enjoyer? Because we know the principle of the Ras Leela is Krishna enjoying, right? How can Balaram become the enjoyer if he is the enjoyed? Furthermore, how can Balaram engage in this Madhurya Rasa pastime when he is the embodiment of Sakhya Ras, right? And there's a third consideration, but we won't have time to get into it. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually comments a lot on this pastime. Because in the beginning of Chaitanya Bhagavat begins, many people will read Chaitanya Bhagavat and they'll be confused because when you read the beginning of it, it reads like Nityananda Bhagavat. It's glorifying Nityananda Prabhu like crazy. At the beginning, it glorifies Mahaprabhu and Nityananda. Then it has one shloka for Mahaprabhu. No, it has one shloka for Nityananda Prabhu. Then second, one shloka for Mahaprabhu. And then again, it has like 20 shlokas for Nityananda Prabhu. So, again, Vrindavan Das Thakur, he is a disciple of Nityananda Prabhu, so we can understand why he's glorifying Nityananda Prabhu so much. But a big point that he makes in order to emphasize Nityananda Prabhu's authority is he's showing he's equal to Krishna, and this is why he starts bringing up Balaram Rasa Yatra. Normally this is a pastime it doesn't come up so much. But he says, oh, Krishna had a Rasa Leela and Balaram had one as well. So he brings it up. But he's not trying to make the point, therefore, as devotees, we should think about this often, or that this is a central pastime. He's making the point that Balaram is equal to Krishna. This is the point he's making. Therefore, Nityananda Prabhu is equal to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the point he's making. And we know that it's not a central pastime because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his commentary, says that the Rasa Leela of Balaram, the Rasa Yatra, is not a rasic one. It is not a sweet Madhurya pastime. It is a pastime of Vaidhi, of opulence, of Maryada. It is in the category of the opulent Supreme Lord. It is not in the category of rasa. Balaram performs this as a secondary feature. This is the equivalent of maybe Krishna fighting on Mahabharata in a sense. Of course, a much more elevated position. But this is not the rasic exchange. Because Balaram, when he's being rasic, he is engaging in Sakhya Ras. The reason why this Rasa Yatra is happening as a separate category. We do not consider this an exchange of rasa. If we want to get technical, it's a sanchari bhav. It's a permutation of their standard bhava. Because Balaram, why did he go to Vraj? He went as service to Krishna. So he's not coming to enjoy Vraj, he's coming to appease the denizens of Vraj. He's not coming to enjoy all of the devotees in Vraj, he's coming